So here's a fun question for you. What do you call a security appliance that's supposed to protect your entire firewall infrastructure, but can be taken over by an unauthenticated attacker with a single HTTP request? Because this week, Cisco disclosed not one, but two CVSS 10.0 vulnerabilities in their Secure Firewall Management Center. And when that thing that manages all of your firewalls is the thing that's vulnerable, I don't know. Red alerts start going off in my head. But that's just a start. We've also got a nation state group mass producing AI generated malware so fast the researchers are calling it a distributed denial of detection. Google just dropped the largest Android security update in almost 8 years, 129 vulnerabilities, including a 0 day that CISA has already flagged. Chinese state linked hackers are burrowing into South American telecom infrastructure with three brand new malware families. And LexisNexis, a company that called itself one of the largest protectors of private data in the world, well, they got breached because their password was Lexis1234. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about.
Forge OS is online and operational. Welcome, operator.
But hey, welcome back to Exploit Brokers by Forgebound Research. I'm your host, Cypher Saval, and this is HN episode 65. As always, I'm sharing information and awareness here. Talk to your own security team for anything specific to your environment. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing. I know that a lot of my audience who watches isn't subscribed. Do me a favor, guys, if you're on YouTube. Now, if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave a review. It genuinely helps other people find the show. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, please also smash that like button and hit the bell icon because we've got 5 stores today and every single one of them matters. Let's get into it. All right, we're starting with something that should be on every network team's radar right now. On March 4th, Cisco published a security advisory bundle covering 48 vulnerabilities in their firewall product line. But two of them are still sitting at the very top of the severity scale, and they're the ones we need to talk about. The first one is CVE 2026 20079, and it's an authentication bypass. To give some context, the Cisco Secure Firewall Management Center, or FMC, is the centralized control plane that manages your entire fleet of Cisco firewalls. Think of it as the brain. It pushes policies, monitors traffic, controls your firewall threat defensive devices. Everything runs through the FMC. This vulnerability exists because of an improperly initialized system process that gets created at boot time. An attacker, and this is a scary part, an unauthenticated attacker, no credentials needed, can send specially crafted HTTP requests to the FMC's web interface and bypass authentication entirely. From there, they can execute scripts and commands with root level access to the underlying operating system. That's the golden goose of hacking right there. Unauthenticated remote root access to the device that manages all of your firewalls. Now, the second one is CVE 2026 2131, and it's a completely separate issue. This one is a remote code execution vulnerability caused by an insecure deserialization of Java byte streams in the FMC's web management interface. An attacker sends a crafted serialized Java object, and the system processes it without proper validation. That gives them arbitrary code execution, again with root privileges. Now, both of these carry a CVSS score of 10.0 out of 10. Both are rated with a scope of changed, which in CVSS terms means that exploiting the FMC can compromise other components under its management, meaning your actual firewall devices in this case. And here's the kicker: no workarounds, patch only. Cisco has released fixed versions, and that's the only path forward. Now, I want to connect this to something we talked about last episode. We covered the Cisco SD WAN vulnerability, CVE 2026 2127, where the Five Eyes intelligence agencies revealed that an APT had been exploiting it since 2023, for years, quietly, on network infrastructure that doesn't have traditional EDR coverage. And that's the pattern worth paying attention to. Cisco found these new FMC vulnerabilities internally during security testing. They say there's no evidence of in the wild exploitation yet. But as the stack pointed out, we happen to know that Cisco zero days get quietly exploited for years before anyone notices. The researcher behind CVE 2026 20079, Brandon Sakai, was also behind a similar FMC flaw discovered last August. These appliances are living on the edge, literally and figuratively. If your organization is running Cisco Secure FMC on premises, this is the kind of thing worth escalating today, not next sprint. Update your stuff. A patch does you no good if it's not installed. All right, staying on the nation state theme for a moment because this next story is honestly, it's one of the stranger things that I've covered on this show. Bitdefender published research on March 5th documenting a campaign by Apt36. That's the Pakistan linked group, also known as Transparent Tribe. And they've basically turned AI coding tools into a malware assembly line. Bitdefender is calling the output Vibeware, and the strategy behind it is distributed denial of detection. Let me break that down. To give context, vibe coding is that trend where people use large language models like Claude and they use that to write code by describing what they want in natural language, basically vibing with an AI to produce software. App36 has taken that concept and applied it to malware and at scale. What they're doing is using AI tools to rapidly generate malware variants across multiple programming languages, not just Python or C. We're talking niche languages like NIM, Zig, and Crystal, alongside Rust, Go, and .NET. And the reason they're doing this is clever. Most EDR products and antivirus engines have weaker behavioral models and signature coverages for less common runtimes. By porting the same malicious logic across multiple languages, they're essentially resetting the detection baseline every time. Now, here's the part that makes it genuinely weird. The malware is bad, like objectively bad. Bitdefender found samples where a credential stealer had a placeholder instead of an actual command and control server address, meaning it could never exfiltrate any data. Another tool had a status reporting function that reset its own timestamp every time it ran. So the infected host always appeared online regardless of its actual state. These kind of bugs are pretty common when you're doing things that are syntactically correct but logically unfinished. That is AI output. But here's the thing, and this is what Bitdefender is warning about. The strategy isn't about quality, it's about volume. App36 is producing new malware variants daily. They're flooding target environments with disposable polyglot binaries, and the idea is that even if 90% of them get caught, the remaining 10% only need to work once. Distributed denial of detection. Overwhelm the defenders not with sophistication, but with noise. And some of it does work. Bitdefender identified a tool called Luminous Cookies that successfully bypassed app bound encryption to steal browser stored credentials from Chrome and Edge. It does this by injecting itself into the browser's own process memory, pretending to be a legitimate component to get the decryption keys. That's not trivial. The targets here are Indian government networks and diplomatic missions, and the campaign uses trusted cloud platforms for command and control: Google Sheets, Slack, Discord, Supabase, what the security community calls living off trusted services or LOTs. That C2 traffic blends right in with legitimate API requests. Now, if you've been following the show, you know we've been tracking this AI and offense trend across multiple episodes. HN63 covered the FortiGate campaign using AI for attack planning. HN64 covered multiple instances of AI enhanced attacks and malware using AI. And now we're seeing App36 take it to the production line. The pattern is clear. AI isn't making attackers smarter per se, it's making them faster and harder to keep up with. So let's shift gears into something that affects basically everyone watching this. On March 3rd, Google released its March 2026 Android Security Bulletin, and this one is a monster. 129 vulnerabilities patched in a single month. This is the highest number since April 2018, almost 8 years ago. That's not normal. The headline vulnerability is CVE 2026 21385, a memory corruption flaw in an open source Qualcomm display driver component. It's caused by an integer overflow when adding user supply data without checking available buffer space. And here's what matters: it affects 234 Qualcomm chipsets. That's not a typo. 234 different system on chip models, from budget devices to flagships. Google's threat analysis group discovered this vulnerability and reported it to Qualcomm on December 18th, 2025. Qualcomm notified device manufacturers on February 2nd, 2026, and Google's bulletin says there are indications that CVE 2026 21385 may be under limited targeted exploitation. That language, limited targeted exploitation, is the phrase that shows up when we're talking about commercial spyware vendors, the kind of companies that sell surveillance tools to governments, and those governments use them against journalists, activists, political opponents. We've seen this pattern before with NSO groups Pegasus, Intellex's Predator, and others. When Google's tag, the threat analysis group, discovers a flaw, it's already been exploited in a targeted fashion. It's almost always that ecosystem. CISA added this to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog on March 3rd, giving federal agencies a deadline of March 24th to patch. Qualcomm declined to say when the earliest known exploitation occurred or how many people were affected, which tells you something about the sensitivity here. Beyond the 0 day, the March update also patches a critical system component vulnerability CVE 2026 0006, scored at a whopping 9.8, that allows remote code execution without any privileges or user interaction. Let me say that again: remote code execution, no privileges required, no user interaction. That's as bad as it gets for a mobile operating system. That's as bad as it gets for any kind of operating system or software. Now, the update is split across two patch levels. 2026 03 covers 63 vulnerabilities in the framework, system, and Google Play components. 2026 03 05 adds another 66, hitting the kernel, Qualcomm, ARM, and other hardware level components. And here's the Android's ecosystem perennial problem. Google releases the patches, but device manufacturers control when you actually get them. If you're on a Pixel, you're probably patched. If you're on anything else, it might be weeks or months. If you're running an Android device with a Qualcomm chipset, which is the vast majority of Android phones out there, it's worth checking your patch level. Update your stuff, especially on your mobile, where the fragmentation problem means you can't always assume it's been done for you. All right, moving on. This next story ties into a theme that we've been covering for months now: the relentless targeting of telecommunications infrastructure by state sponsored actors. On March 6th, Cisco Talos published research on a threat cluster they're calling U8T 9244. And the picture they paint is deeply concerning. To give some context, U8T 9244 is a China linked advanced persistent threat group, an app group, that has been targeting telecom providers in South America since at least 2024. Talos assesses with high confidence that this cluster is closely associated with FamousSparrow and Tropic Trooper, both well documented China Nexus APT, apt or advanced persistent threat groups, with histories of targeting government, telecom, and critical infrastructure. Now, the obvious question: is this Salt Typhoon? For those of you who haven't followed the Salt Typhoon saga, that's the Chinese state sponsored group responsible for breaching at least 9 US telecom companies, compromising wiretap systems, and more recently, being linked to over 200 companies across 80 countries. Salt Typhoon has been the dominant telecom threat story for over a year. Now, Talos explicitly addresses this, and their answer is careful. While UAT 9244 and Salt Typhoon share the same target profile, they could not establish a solid connection between the two clusters. That's responsible attribution, acknowledging the overlap while being honest about the limits of their evidence. What makes this campaign interesting, technically, is the tool set. UAT 9244 is using three previously undocumented malware families that cover the full spectrum of an enterprise environment. First, Turndoor, a Windows backdoor. It's a variant of Crowdoor, which itself is a variant of Sparrowdoor from FamousSparrow. That lineage is clear. It uses DLL side loading through a legitimate executable, loading a malicious DLL that decrypts and executes the final payload in memory. Classic. Now, it's been refined over multiple iterations, though. Next, or second, we see PeerTime, a Linux backdoor that communicates using a BitTorrent based peer to peer protocol. This is significant because peer to peer C2 makes it much harder for defenders to block or track. It's compiled for multiple architectures, including ARM, Arch, PowerPC, and MIPS, which tells you it's designed to run on embedded systems and network appliances, routers, switches, edge devices, things that don't have EDR agents. Next, or third, Brute Entry, a Golang based brute force scanner that turns compromised Linux systems and edge devices into what's called operational relay boxes, or ORBs. These scan and brute force Tomcat, Postgres, and SSH servers, expanding the attack surface from within the target's own network. Basically, they're turning compromised infrastructure into a launching pad for further attacks. They're pivoting laterally, or and sometimes vertically if they can get more access through some of those lateral attacks. Now, the combination of all three, Windows endpoints, Linux servers, and edge devices, all simultaneously compromised, is what makes this particularly dangerous for telecom environments. These companies run massive mixed networks. If an attacker has footholds on every layer, detection and containment becomes exponentially harder. And this is the broader pattern that we keep seeing. Telecom companies are prime targets because of what they carry: call records, metadata, and in some cases, the infrastructure used for lawful intercept, specifically wiretaps. Whoever controls the telecom backbone can potentially surveil an entire country's communications. All right, the last story. Let's close the story out with a story that, well, honestly, this one made me shake my head. Not because of the sophistication of the attack, quite the opposite. So, on March 3rd, a threat actor operating under the name FulcrumSec publicly claimed responsibility for breaching LexisNexis Legal and Professional. That's the legal data and analytics division of Relex Group, one of the largest information companies in the world. LexisNexis provides research tools, legal databases, and risk management solutions used by law firms, government agencies, and corporations across 150 countries. According to Fulcrum Sex disclosure, initial access was gained on February 24th by exploiting a React 2 shell vulnerability in an unpatched React frontend application. React 2 shell, for those who are unfamiliar, is a known vulnerability class in React applications that can allow server side code execution through the front end. The attacker says this vulnerability has been sitting there, unpatched, for months, despite knowing exploits being publicly available. But here's where it gets painful. Once inside, the attacker found that compromised ECS task containers, that's an Amazon Elastic Container Service role, that had been granted read access to essentially everything: the production Redshift data warehouse, 17 VPC databases, AWS Secrets Manager, and the company's Qualtrics survey platform. A single task role with keys to the kingdom. That is super level, super root level access. And that's kind of one of the principles that is usually supposed to be practiced, the least privilege idea. The RDS master password, oh man, Lexis1234. I'm going to say that again. The master password for a database at one of the world's largest legal data companies was Lexis1234. Security by obscurity does not work. They might as well have not put a password at all. And neither does security by I'll change the password later. That doesn't work either. The exfiltrated data reportedly includes 3.9 million database records across 536 Redshift tables and 430 plus VPC database tables, around 400,000 cloud user profiles with names, emails, phone numbers, and job functions, 21,000 enterprise customer accounts, law firms, universities, government agencies, 53 plaintext AWS Secrets Manager entries, and 118 user accounts with .gov email addresses belonging to federal judges, Department of Justice attorneys, SEC staff, and federal court clerks. LexisNexis is used in a lot of places. Now, LexisNexis has confirmed the breach, but is characterizing the data as mostly legacy deprecated data from prior to 2020. They say no social security numbers, active passwords, or financial information was compromised. And look, maybe that's accurate. But as Fulcrum said pointed out in their rather editorial disclosure, which definition of customer data excludes 400,000 named individuals with email addresses and phone numbers? I'm pretty sure the definition includes that. Now, this is also not the first breach for LexisNexis. Last year, a separate incident through a compromised GitHub account exposed personal data belonging to over 364,000 individuals, including social security numbers. Two breaches in 2 years for a company that positions itself as one of the largest protectors of private data in the world. The cover up is always worse than the crime, but in this case, the crime itself is pretty rough. All right, let's bring it home. Five stores this week, and the through line connecting all of them is infrastructure trust. We trust our firewall management consoles, our mobile operating systems, our telecom backbones, our legal data providers. And this week, every single one of those trust boundaries got tested. Here are the five things to be aware of coming out of the episode. Number one, network security appliances are high value targets. The Cisco FMC vulnerabilities follow the same pattern as the SD WAN disclosure from the previous episode. If the management plane of your security infrastructure is compromised, well, everything downstream is at risk. Keeping management interfaces off untrusted networks and patching immediately. That's the baseline. Next, number two, AI is changing the economics of malware, not the sophistication. App 36 Vibeware campaign shows that the real threat from AI assisted malware isn't brilliance, it's volume. Detection teams may need to rethink their approach to handle floods of low quality polyglot variants rather than a few high quality implants. Then, number three, mobile patching remains the ecosystem's Achilles heel. 129 vulnerabilities in one Android update, including an actively exploited Qualcomm zero day across 234 chipsets. Google can release patches, but manufacturers and carriers control the timeline. Check your patch level and keep devices updated. It's the simplest thing that makes the biggest difference. Then, number four, telecom targeting is not slowing down. UAT 9244 demonstrates that China aligned actors continue investing in multi platform telecom compromise toolkits, Windows, Linux, and edge devices simultaneously. Peer to peer or P2P, command and control, and orb based expansion makes these intrusions exceptionally difficult to detect and to contain. Lastly, number five, cloud security basics still matter more than anything. The LexisNexis breach wasn't caused by a zero day or an advanced attack. It was an unpatched application, an overly permissive IAM role, and a weak password. The fundamentals, least privilege, patch management, credential hygiene, remain the most impactful things any organization can do. And that's going to do it for HN65. As always, I'm sharing information and awareness here, not specifically telling you what to do in your environment. Talk to your security team for your specific situation. However, if you found this episode useful, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, a colleague, a friend, your IT team. The more people who are aware of what's happening out there, the harder it becomes for bad actors. And that's really what this show is about. We're all in this together. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button on YouTube or follow us on your podcast platform of choice. Leave a review if you can. It genuinely helps. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and update your stuff. I'll catch you in the next one.